The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives is back for season 4, and it's less Mormon than ever. Or is it more Mormon than ever? One thing's for sure, there are less wives than ever, but the real question everyone's asking is, why is Taylor on a swing? And why are there horses? I was raised Mormon, and I'm still Mormon, and I live in Provo, Utah, so I'm pretty invested in the way that this show represents my religion and culture. So today, with my insider knowledge as a Mormon, a Latter-day Saint if you will, I'm going to be comparing the show to my experiences growing up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And for those of you who are LDS, I'm going to be filling you in on what the rest of the world is learning about us. Now, first things first, I still can't figure out why there's horses in the intro. If you know, please leave a comment, but I think that the swing Taylor's is on is a reference to the swinging scandal. For those of you who aren't super familiar with what the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives even is, and are just vaguely aware of some sort of swinging scandal, basically what happened is there was a group of Utah moms who made TikToks together and who were involved in a scandal in which they were swinging with each other's husbands. And then Taylor came out, Taylor Frankie Paul, and exposed everyone and told the truth, and there were all these headlines, Mormon swinging scandal. After that, Hulu ended up making this show about it, but Taylor was one of the only girls from the original Mom Talk group that is actually on the show, so most of the girls on the show right now were not swingers. And no, I don't know any Mormons who are swingers. I don't think swinging is an inherently Mormon thing. Upside down pineapple is also a popular Mormon Halloween costume. Swinging is a little trendy right now. I've heard of some, swingers here and there, but it is not a specifically Mormon thing that I am personally experienced. And all of the LDS people I know who know about this show are annoyed that people think that we're swingers. But the show isn't even about that anymore. It's literally not about that at all anymore. But even though they don't talk about swinging anymore, this season, weirdly enough, has the most Mormon references out of any of the last 3 seasons. I didn't even make a video for season 3 because first of all, it was terrible. Second of all, it was terribly boring. And third of all, I hated it. So I didn't even finish the season. But another reason I didn't make a video about it is because it barely even referenced Mormons. So it was like, what even is there to talk about? But this season, oh boy. Not only did they bring it up a lot in like funny, jokey ways, but there's also a few core themes of the season that are tied to our religion. I think the most relatable part of the show was the very beginning because it was a little boring and nothing was really going on, which is a pretty accurate representation of Provo, Utah. We also right off the bat have Taylor addressing spirituality, which basically never happened in the last 3 seasons. Very rarely are the characters addressing like their relationship with God, weirdly enough, even though it's technically like based on a religion, but we do get a couple references to that. So Taylor starts off by saying the last year she spent a lot of time home alone with her kids, praying and asking God to guide her in whatever direction she needs to go in. And we can also see some of this on her Instagram. She has been posting pictures of the Bible, pictures of the Book of Mormon, pictures of sort of study books for the Bibles that are definitely not LDS, but then sometimes I'll just randomly see a Book of Mormon or a Doctrine and Covenants, and in one post you can actually see her patriarchal blessing. Patriarchal blessing is a very special blessing you're given in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints as sort of like a coming of age thing, and the blessing is supposed to guide you through your life. So it's interesting that she had that out. Taylor seems to be in a pretty good headspace at the beginning of the show. I feel like that's her peak, at least throughout this whole season, and definitely her rock bottom was 2 days ago when she got charged with a DV charge. Things are not looking good for Taylor Frankie Paul. We're all very interested to see what happens in The Bachelorette. I am going to be making a series reacting to all the episodes in The Bachelorette, so definitely subscribe for that if you want to get a real life Mormon opinion on the most Mormon series of The Bachelorette ever, or if you just want to get filled in all the tea as a real Latter-day Saint. Yeah, I've seen some conflicting opinions on Taylor posting spiritual stuff on her social media. Some people think it's performative. Some people think it doesn't matter because she's this toxic influence on the church anyways, so who cares if she's posting about God? That's not actually gonna make a difference. And some people think that her posting about God is a good thing and it could still influence the young women or creeps who follow her. Whether Taylor Frankie Paul has a positive influence in the world is more up in the air than ever with her current DV charge, but we are going to be focusing on the Mormon stereotype stuff, not fully on like Taylor, Frankie, Paul's character arc. The show starts on a very specific thematic note, and I know this is just like, it's trash reality TV, but they are trying to form some sort of a cohesive narrative here, and they are trying to develop characters, and they're trying to have themes, and the number one theme that it starts out with is the idea of this progressivism in the LDS church of we're moving the church forward, and we're breaking boundaries by not wearing our undergarments, and by drinking coffee, and by also working, and showing other women that they can have dreams, and also that women can make TikToks dances. It doesn't matter how many TikTok dances Mom Talk does, they cannot influence me into thinking that I can do a TikTok dance because I'm not very coordinated. I took a dance class in college, and that was my hardest class. They start out with this quote that they've used in basically every season of, we were raised to be these housewives for the men. And right off the bat, I personally don't feel like I was raised to be a housewife for a man. If anything, I did feel like there was a pressure of, you need to have a career and have aspirations, but also want to be a mother. Like, you have to do it both. You have to do it all. An important detail that you should know is that I did not grow up in Provo, Utah. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. So I grew up in a pretty liberal state. I grew up in an environment where there were not a lot of church members. There were not a lot of religious people in general. It's a pretty secular upbringing around me. And so the church, I felt like, was very different from the rest of the culture I grew up in. However, at the same time, the culture I grew up in did influence the church. So I personally didn't find the culture to be super duper judgmental or restricting. I definitely grew up with rules like don't smoke, don't drink. I think a lot of kids grow up with those rules. There was definitely an expectation for a degree of modesty. I did wear tank tops up until like high school or even later than that. Just wasn't a big deal. Did not wear crop tops. Not so with my sister. My sister gets away with a lot more than I did. Not that I was even necessarily trying to get away with stuff. I guess I just was fine living how I lived. I just didn't feel like, I guess I just wasn't that fashionable, so maybe that's why it didn't really cross my mind that modesty was really an issue that I cared about at all as a kid. I just kind of wore what I wore. There's a scene of Jen trying on clothes, and Whitney is like, oh my gosh, Jen has come such a long way from wanting to be this perfect little Mormon girl, and now look at her go. And I actually like Whitney. I'm going to get more into Whitney. She's actually become kind of a fan favorite, but I feel like you can grow into your own and still become a confident person while still being LDS. When you said, quote, now she's finding ways to express herself, finding more of who she is, her own identity, her own fashion, and not letting this anxiety about being the perfect Mormon identify her. Personally, I don't feel like the anxiety of being a perfect Mormon identifies me, and I don't think it really ever has. I'm sure it is for some people. I don't want to discount their experience, but I have definitely been able to, in my 20s, grow into myself. But I feel like as I've grown up, I've found more ways to express myself. I've discovered my identity. I've become more confident. And that's not because I'm not Mormon anymore, that's just because I'm older. So I think kind of this post-Mormon glow up that some people reportedly have is just the result of glowing up because you're getting older anyway. Yeah, I guess part of what I've discovered as my identity, when they say Jen is discovering her identity, I've definitely discovered my identity as LDS. And that's a big part of my life is being religious and Jesus Christ and being involved in my church community or being valued as a child of God, for example. Maybe my identity is I make videos. And so these are things that I have formed my identity as, and being LDS doesn't restrict me from having an identity. So if you feel that way and you are LDS, just know you can still have an identity. Another thing that's funny is I feel through the course of these seasons, the insinuation has been the church pressures us to have all these kids, but then they keep having kids and they seem to be perfectly happy with their kids. 90% of the time they're oh my gosh, I'm pregnant, oh my gosh, I want to have another baby. No one seems to really have regretted having kids. The girls all seem to love being mothers, and I have to say, while I was watching the show, I thought they didn't seem abusive moms. They seemed fine moms. I'm not seeing anyone DVing their kids, until it did come out that Taylor is DVing her I guess, ex in front of her kids. I don't think it's confirmed that Taylor is, like, actually, like, well, she might be DVing her kid. Not great. So, not so sure how good of moms they are, but they seem fine. In the show, it seems fine. There's no obvious abuse of, like, the moms, like, dismissing their kids or whatever. Like, they bring their kids to stuff. They're always, like, looking out for their kids, caring for their kids. The main point I'm trying to make is, like, this idea that these women are being pressured into being moms doesn't land with me, because it seems like they really do genuinely like being moms. And maybe, like, having kids at 19 out of wedlock, like, wasn't the ideal, but they, again, seem to be happy with kids and seem to want more of them. And it seems to bring joy into their lives, except for when Jen is on Dancing with the Stars. She complains about her kids a little bit, but yeah, I don't see a lot of child abuse personally in the LDS church, just like among normal families. I just see a lot of normal families, normal parents trying to just get by in life. So one of the first scenes of the show is something called the Sip and See. My non-LDS friends have been asking me, what's a Sip and See? You guys doing Sip and Sees in Utah? And I'm like, I have never once heard of a Sip and See. The Sip and See is basically a party where 3 of the moms who just had babies are hosting a party for everyone to come meet the babies. But everyone's definitely already met the babies because they're all good friends, so it's just kind of a plot device to get everyone to come and have a party together. And then the producer's like, so what are you gonna be sipping on? And there's a lot of suspense around that. I think there was soda that they were sipping on. And then they see the baby, so sip the soda or wine and then see the baby. And then someone mentions, this is the first time we've been together since this one baby's blessing of comfort. A blessing of comfort is different from a baby blessing. So pretty sure what she meant was a baby blessing, which is when a baby is born, you just give it a special blessing. But a blessing of comfort can be given at any age. Also at the Sip and See, they decide to release butterflies as a symbol of a new beginning, I guess. Also at the Sip and See, they decide to do a butterfly release for new beginnings, to represent new beginnings, and makes complete sense because butterflies are very important to Mormons. We actually have a butterfly symposium in Utah, halfway between Provo and Salt Lake, in a little place called American Fork, Utah. A great date spot. Speaking of dating, I would love to talk about these 2 guys that Taylor tries to date and just the antics that occur. This happens at the beginning of the season before things really start to go south with her ex. There's a storyline where Taylor meets this guy on a TikTok live, then flies him out to see her, and they're talking about religion. He was allegedly raised Christian, so when she says, what do you know about Mormons? He says, well, people say you guys are a cult. So that was a pretty relatable scene because in my experience, other Christians are the most likely to say that we're a cult or be our haters, along with like staunch atheists, and then regular people in real life usually don't know and don't care. You'd be surprised how many people in America straight up don't know what a Mormon is. Like, if you're watching this, you probably have some sort of tangential interest or knowledge in, like, the LDS church or in, like, Mormons or whatever. So yeah, this guy from TikTok that Taylor doesn't really know that well and isn't actually technically dating, who she flew all the way out to Utah, comes and then meets all of her friends, all of Mom Talk, and then Demi, who's actually not in Mom Talk. I don't know why she's in this scene. Demi makes a joke that it's like, oh, because it's like him and then a bunch of girls. Demi is like, it's like Joseph Smith and his many wives. And to me, it was more like the wives and then they're Joseph Smith in parentheses. He's just like awkwardly being asked questions by them. This guy looks very out of place. I don't know if he had it in him to start the next great American religious movement. Then later they're talking about the swinging scandal again with this Australian guy that Taylor has over, and he's asking about the swinging, and he makes a joke about, oh, is like Joe Smith okay with that? So he knows who Joseph Smith is. And then for a second, Taylor's like, who? Because Taylor doesn't realize Joe Smith is Joseph Smith. And then Miranda's like, oh, she means Joseph Smith. And Taylor's like, oh yeah, haha, I get it, because of polygamy. And then the Australian guy goes, who's polygamy? Doesn't know what polygamy is, never heard the word polygamy in his life. So yeah, this guy is not known for being the brightest, but I also think the average LDS member would be surprised at how little the world knows about us. Like, not knowing what polygamy is kind of wild. I guess if you're in Australia, maybe they've just never had polygamy in Australia. I feel like that's something you learn in school. Maybe I'm wrong. Funny story, when I went to Nashville to visit my friend, I met a bunch of her friends, and they had never heard of Mormons before. Some of them had watched Secret Lives, but they'd heard of Secret Lives, but I had one guy come up to me and ask me, like, straight up, like, totally straight face. He says, I have a question. What's the difference between Mormon and Amish? Like, straight up, dead serious. I'm like, so Amish can't use electricity, and Mormons are basically normal people. Like, compared to Amish. I love the Amish, by the way. Shout out to my friend Amish dude. So that's kind of how, like, my Amish obsession started. Actually, my Amish obsession started my Amish obsession goes way back, but that's for a whole nother video. So another problem with dating in Utah is beauty standards. They don't actually talk about beauty standards in the show in relation to dating, but I just needed a good segue into the next topic. So of course the girls are all adorned with their classic Utah curls with the big waves and the straight ends and their very tan skin. And look, I can see, I get a tan, okay? I get wanting to be tan, whatever. But please tell me, why is Miranda almost the same color as Layla? Actually, you don't need to tell me why. It's because we're in Utah. I'm also just, like, generally not a fan of the heavy makeup. A lot of them in a lot of scenes don't wear a ton of makeup because they're just, like, lounging around cool girls, and they'll just, like, maybe they won't wear makeup at all, and, you know, I think that's kind of chill. I honestly think a lot of them look prettier with a lot less makeup. I am not a fan of the makeup artist who did the makeup for the confessionals. It's all just very, like, Utah coded, all, like, the heavy makeup. Like, that type of makeup is very real in Utah. Like, people will wear that type of makeup to school, like, straight up. They'll wear it to BYU, to college. Outside of, like, the makeup and the hair, there's some serious, like, body image issues going on with specifically one of the girls, and that is Layla. And unfortunately, Layla has anorexia, and it's super sad, and it's revealed in, like, the very last episode, spoiler alert. She talks about, like, the beauty standards of Utah and how she's abusing GLP-1s, which I found out just means Ozempic. This girl literally has a BMI of, like, 14. Like, this girl is 99 pounds and 5'10". So it's pretty, like, horrible. Yeah, I will say, like, that anorexics do exist outside Utah, so I wouldn't say, like, you know, anorexia is exclusive to Utah, but, you know, there's definitely, like, high beauty standards in Utah. I mean, we have a lot of plastic surgery that goes on in Utah. There's a lot of plastic surgery being had by these girls. Utah is 10th, it's around 10th in the rates of plastic surgery per capita. So it's high. Like, we have a lot of plastic surgery here, but it's no, like, LA. I don't know if they, like, fully address it as, like, this is Utah, like, the land of the plastic surgeries. It's more like we're reality TV stars, so I'm gonna go get a touch-up, except by touch-up, I mean, like, go under full anesthesia and have, like, a full surgery. So Taylor does that, and because she gets this touch-up, she's unable to participate in the pickleball tournaments. And that, my friends, is the most Mormon part of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives Season 4, the pickleball tournament, mom talk versus dad talk. Everyone is so excited about the pickleball. They set up these big tents, and they have a whole bracket of Mormons love pickleball. I think Mormons love pickleball for the same reason that Mormons love backflips. That's just kind of what we have to do for fun. Yeah, I played a lot of pickleball on my mission. I have been asked on pickleball dates. Never been on a pickleball date because I actually don't like pickleball. Please don't cancel me. I would kind of rather play, like, any other sport. So we've talked a lot about Utah, we've talked a lot about the general culture of the church, but does the show say anything specific about the actual teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Not a whole lot, but there are a couple specific scenes that I'd like to bring up. There's one funny part where Macy is fighting someone and her husband, Jacob, says, it's taught in the Book of Mormon, it's taught in the Bible to show forgiveness, and I think this is one time that Macy needs to do that. And I was just like, where has this energy been the last 3 seasons? We could really use some more forgiveness in the show. But if we had more forgiveness in the show, that would take away, like, 80% of the plot lines, because 80% of the plot lines is people holding grudges. Then more importantly, I want to talk about the priesthood scene. A lot of people are talking about this right now. So Jacob in this scene is trying to help Macy. Macy is a very, like, independent woman, boss babe type girl, and she wrote her own book. and she's organizing everything with the book, and she's super stressed out, and there's just so much to do with her content and her book, and her husband Jacob is trying to help, and he doesn't quite know how to help, but he's trying. But he is being a little annoying and overbearing. So Macy's like, "You're being annoying," and then Jacob has a confessional where he says, "I feel like me and Macy are a little different from the typical Mormon couple. Men get the priesthood when they're 12 and women don't," which is true. And then going back to what he said, priesthood should be the ultimate decision maker, but things in the house, but I'm not going to be an a-hole and try and make decisions for her. I'm not trying to be toxic and try and take things that aren't mine. I try and give her solutions and try and help. I think that's what a husband should do. I don't want her to be walked all over. This line was a little controversial. Some people were saying that Jacob is basically saying I should be able to tell her what to do. It's kind of a weird way that he put it. Then Macy put on her story that specific line, the producers had really coaxed that out of him, so we're not so sure that's even something that Jacob like fiercely holds to. Because then later Jacob is expressing how proud he is of Macy, and he literally starts crying. I think he's really sweet. I think he has a good heart. I think a lot of the dads are just trying to learn how to navigate this role as like a stay-at-home dad and a support for their wives who are the primary breadwinners. I'm going to talk more about that in just a second. In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they do teach more traditional gender roles. So we do teach like, oh, the man is kind of like the priesthood leader, like he leads, but at the same time, we do emphasize like an egalitarian partnership. So like growing up in my house, I never felt like my dad was just the one like telling everyone what we should do. Actually, my mom was the one telling everyone what to do. But one thing I do know is like these dads are annoyed. They're annoyed that their wives are getting the spotlight. Most of them are like fairly good sports about it, but like it's clearly hard for some of these dads to quit their jobs and to be stay-at-home dads. But I will tell you, I think the man who does the best job of supporting his wife, and you could even say like being a leader in their family, is Connor, Whitney's husband. Whitney is a fan favorite this season, like I already said, but I'm also biased because I met Whitney and honestly she was so fun. Like I actually loved her. Whitney really just got a bad edit the first 3 seasons and everyone hated her, and this season she got a great edit and now everyone loves her. So that just kind of shows you how the editing can shape the public opinion of what these characters are like. They're barely even real people on the show. Like this show barely even represents them as real people. Like forget about representing the LDS church. Like the show barely represents the actual people that the main cast members are. Connor is nothing but supportive. When Whitney gets the call that she got greenlit for this new show that she's gonna be on, Connor is thrilled for her, and Whitney also gets kind of overwhelmed. Whitney gets overwhelmed easy, which relatable, but Connor is such a good support for her through it. In this moment when she's like kind of freaking out, she's like, yeah, like I don't know how we're gonna like go between Utah and LA, like it's so stressful. Connor says, hey, if we need to, we'll move to LA. Like, hey, I'm here to support you. I feel like this is what leadership really is. Leadership is so much deeper than just like telling your wife what to do. So yeah, if anyone's a good priesthood leader, I would say it's Connor. You can tell having a supportive husband means everything to Whitney because she seems so confident, so happy through the whole Dancing with the Stars experience. Connor and Zach are both in LA with their wives who are both on Dancing with the Stars. Dancing with the Stars, if you don't know, Dancing with the Stars is like a weirdly, like secretly very Mormon show because a lot of the dancers in the show were like BYU ballroom dancers, like at the BYU team in Utah, like Brigham Young University. Dancing with the Stars has a very grueling schedule. So Whitney and Jen are working these long days. They're spending like 14-hour days, like dancing and dancing and dancing all day long. And they both have at least 2 kids each. So Connor decides to quit his job to take care of the kids because it's a lot for him to juggle working a job and taking care of the kids, and Whitney also working a very intense job. And Whitney's making a lot of money for their family. Like she's providing a good life for her kids. She's also living her dreams and is super happy. So Connor is sad about quitting his job. Like he says he really loved his job. Some LDS people I know are like more traditional and would say like the wife should not be providing and the husband needs to be providing and the wife is like gonna be better with the kid. These gender roles are not exclusively Mormon. Like if you try and tell me like in the Mormon culture it says that the men need to provide, like this is an American thing, dare I say like a Western thing. So I'm not gonna say there's like no like truth to that of like maybe women are like better with kids or like kids more. But I do just think like it's so individual. I'm basically done with this. This is gone. It's the island time. And Jen, you know, Zach has been worse. Zach has had worse edits, worse seasons, but he does like some complaining about being a stay-at-home dad with the kids being really hard for him, which understandable if you're like literally spending like 14-hour days at home alone with these kids, but Connor doesn't complain at all. Anyway, Zach is not doing so great being a stay-at-home dad, and he's feeling very unfulfilled and kind of fed up with like spending all day at home with like little kids. And so he has this meeting with Connor, and I don't know why Zach and Connor aren't hanging out more. Like if I'm them, I'm hanging out all day every day. Like they're both just taking care of kids all day in LA doing nothing. So maybe they're just not that close. I guess their wives are fighting, so maybe for that reason they can't like be besties. They meet up and Zach is like, yeah, it's kind of tough. Like I don't like totally feel fulfilled and like it's hard being at home with a bunch of little kids all day every day. And Connor's like, yeah, it was hard for me too. Like, you want to know what I've been doing to like, that's been making me happy recently? And Zach says, what? And he's like, magic. So Connor has literally like become a magician because he's bored and wants something to like stimulate his mind basically. Zach is like, yeah, maybe I should like get into doing something to, you know, like have a hobby, have some fulfillment in my life. They both just kind of realized too in that moment, like this is how their wives felt when they were stay-at-home moms. And Zach says this is probably why they started doing TikTok. And I guess like what this is really revealing in this scene is that whether it's the women or the men, like staying at home taking care of the kids does have its challenges. And there's also drawbacks to being the one who works all day because a lot of these moms suffer really bad mom guilt. Like at least 4 of them explicitly say like, I feel like I'm not making enough time for my kids. Like I feel like a terrible mom. And they'll start like crying over this. Like this isn't just in passing. Like they feel really sad that they're not there to spend more time with their like very, very young kids. So on one hand, like these women are actually getting a lot of happiness and fulfillment out of like fulfilling their dreams of like writing a book, or like Whitney's going on Broadway, which is like pretty cool. Or like Layla is like trying to become a model, and they have all these things going for them that they're actually enjoying. Then there's like this constant pull and like balance of like, can they do these things and still be a good mom? And then the dads are feeling like, can I be a stay-at-home dad and still be a good dad? And the show doesn't necessarily answer that question. Maybe it's just life. Maybe it's just hard to do it all. Maybe no matter what, whether you're a mom or a dad, you're not going to be able to 100% of the time give 100% to your career, your passions, and 100% to your kids, and 100% to your spouse all the time. Just like I can't give 100% to my YouTube, my Instagram, and my school at once. So 2 of them are always suffering, and school is never the priority. Let me just say that. I can't give 100% to Twitter either at the same time. I have one last major topic that I really want to cover. I think this is probably the most interesting part of the video. So by this point in the show, Taylor has gone downhill. She's not doing too hot as she was at the beginning because the producers have basically orchestrated scenes where she ends up with her ex, where oh, they're at a party together. Oh, mom talk and dad talk are all staying in the same house overnight. And Taylor wakes up in her ex's bed. Her friends find her there. And one of her friends is like, oh, what are you doing, Taylor? Like, they're obviously mad at her. And then her friend is like, what, were you in like Bible study or something? And then Taylor's like, yeah, my Bible's right over here. Obviously her friends are mad at her, but you know who is more mad at her and Taylor knows is going to be more mad at her is Taylor's mom. So we have a fun little scene in the park where Taylor and her mom and her sister, for some reason, I don't know why her sister is in the middle of the fight. She barely says anything. She just kind of like sits in the bench awkwardly in between them, like as they fight over her. But Leanne is like asking how the trip went, and Taylor's like not really like, she's kind of burying the lead. And then Leanne's like, so did you like sleep with Dakota? And Taylor's like, nope, I didn't. And lies to her because she says, I'm afraid of what you're gonna think, so I don't even want to tell you. And then her mom, Leanne, starts getting mad at her for that and is like, why don't you want to tell me things? And then Taylor's like, well, it's because you're so mean to me whenever I do anything wrong. Like, it doesn't feel helpful for me to talk to you about these things, and I want you to be my safe space, but you're just not for me. Taylor ends up telling her, and then they get in this big fight, and Leanne is like calling her names. She's like, you were being so stupid. Why did you do that? And Taylor's like, I know I was being stupid. Like, you are not being helpful at all. I already knew that. Leanne is in these confessionals being like, I just want Taylor to not get hurt. I'm just trying to tell her what I think is best for her. In the confessionals, Leanne is like, quote, I think that going back to church and having that foundation, it helped me get back on track. I feel like Taylor would be more grounded if she was going to church and doing the things she's been taught. And so Leanne is kind of trying to say this in this argument. And then Taylor, in her confessional, is like, I know I effed up again. This is a quote. I think right now, I think I just want her as a mom and to have some grace. It's already done, so you can either help me through this or judge me again and see how far it gets us. This scene is really showcasing the dynamic of what it's like to have a kid that is very obviously going against your religion, doing things that you don't think are right. But not just going against your religion, like just going against like common sense. Like generally you don't want to sleep with your ex, like your toxic ex that you're trying to get over that you have a kid with. Generally, I don't think that's a good idea, even if you're not religious. So, and that's the opinion of all the girls too. Like all the girls on the show, like whether or not they're religious, they're like, Taylor, you really messed up this time. But then Taylor just feels really hurt by her mom, and she doesn't feel hurt. And so Taylor's obviously being really rude to her back. And so Leanne pulls this one out. She goes, in the 10 Commandments, what does it say? Does it say to honor your kids? No, one of the 10 Commandments is to honor your mother and father, and you're the worst at it. And Taylor's like, well, yeah, because like you're so disrespectful to me. Like, I'm not going to be respectful to you. Yeah, then later when she's with Macy says, kids rebel more when they feel like they can't tell their parents things. And she says, when she was being abused, that she felt like she couldn't tell her parents about it, but it wasn't even because they necessarily raised her poorly. It's just kind of like a generational thing of, well, we don't talk to our parents about things because we don't want to get in trouble. Yeah, one thing that Taylor is expressing is she says, I quote, I think it would be nice to not have my mom talk about prayer, the Bible with me, kind of just like be human with me. Like everyone makes mistakes regardless of religion. So what do you think? To what extent is it important to like share your own morals and values with your kids and teach them versus just being there for them and listening to them and being a person for them? Taylor and Leanne end up having a therapy session, and they actually have a really good chat with their therapist. They have this great therapy session, and they're like, wow, we understand each other so much better now. And then like 5 minutes later, they're back at it, fighting the same old fight. So is this show representative of the average life of a Latter-day Saint, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? No, I don't think so. But does it bring up some interesting LDS adjacent related themes and have some fun little Mormon jokes? Yeah, it does. Is it harmful for the church to have these women representing us who do not follow the standards that the average Latter-day Saint follows? Or is all publicity good publicity? That's for you to decide. Tell me in the comments below what you think about this show, what you think about these themes that we discussed, and if you think that the show is overall a net positive or net negative in the world. I'm going to be doing a video series about The Bachelorette. I'm going to be, I think, reacting to each episode. We'll see what happens in the first episode and if it's good enough to do a full video on it. I think we're going to do a full video on it. Subscribe to the Gwowls channel. Go follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And I will see you next week.